So I will switch to my mother tongue. Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting. The first thing we need to do is adopt our agenda. If there are no requests for amendments, we can deem it to be adopted. We have interpretation today in 16 languages: German, English, Bulgarian, Croatian, Spanish, French, Greek, Hungarian, Italian, Lithuanian, Dutch, Polish, Portuguese, Romanian, Slovenian and Swedish. There are recommendations from the coordinators which have been distributed by email. If there are no objections to those, they will be deemed adopted. We also have available the minutes from the 22nd of April meeting for your approval. If there are no comments on that, this will likewise be deemed approved. Item 5 on the agenda is our next item. This is a joint hearing organised by the European Committee on the Defence of Democracy and the Culture Committee on media in the Union and resilience in the media. Today's discussion is particularly opportune and extremely important because both our committees are firmly convinced that a free press, independent, pluralist and resilient press is essential to democracy. Yet here in the European Union there are very worrying developments underway. We've seen press freedom declining, we've seen threats against journalists, and we've seen ever greater concentration in the whole media sector. The economic backdrop is of course problematic. We've seen political interference, but also in general an information environment which is more and more subject to manipulation. So the conditions in the area of media are deteriorating rapidly, and this is a threat not just to the freedom of the press and the free media, but to democracy itself. And this is why this hearing is so important to the two committees. We're going to hear eminent representatives from European journalists and people from the public sector talking about the media, and we're going to look also at resilience in the whole sector of the media and how we can maintain, preserve and protect the integrity of the media and the independence of the media in a digital environment where there's increasing economic and political pressure being put on them. So, first of all, I will now hand over the chairmanship to Ms. Rio, who chairs the Culture Committee. Thank you very much. From me too, very warm welcome. The free media is a basis of which underpins our democracy, and we see at the moment that both the political and societal context is changing rapidly, and this has major impacts. We have seen legislation on protection of the media, and we have seen how important it is that we implement this. We are looking at the implementation of ENFA in a working group, and it is chaired by Sabine Verheyen and is one of the very important initiatives that we've taken. All the groups are represented there. Libe is also represented. So this hearing is something which is very important and very topical for us. We need to look at the challenges for society, the technological changes, the implications for users, and the implications for the whole European media landscape. Young people in particular are turning away from traditional media and are using other sources to obtain information. More and more people get their news online, and this is very significant because when you see what a close connection there is between the media landscape and democracy throughout all our countries, you see what the implications are and how they're only ever growing. Our first panel deals with the situation of the media in the EU, and we are very fortunate enough to have some top experts who can tell us about the state of the art situation in our sector. Ms. Herr Brassel and Ms. from the European Broadcasting Union.
Public service media in the EU. Mr. GEKIERE will inform us about the role of public service media and the main trends that they are facing relating to trust, technological change and innovation. Mr. Einar HÅLIEN is editor at Schibsted Media. With his background as an editor and as an author of the 2024 report Editorial Media as as defenders of democracies. He will share insights on the state of editorial media in European democracies and current challenges. And Mrs. Katharina SCHELL, Vice President of the Presseclub Concordia and member of the Austrian Press Council, focuses on the intersection of journalism and digital innovation. Her work at AI, data journalism, and communication technologies could help us to explore how the media landscape is being reshaped by digital technologies. Und nun gebe ich das Wort zuerst an Herrn GEKIERE.
So it's first of all my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. GEKIERE for 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Bonjour, Madame Loiseau, dear Mrs. Riel. Many thanks for the invitation. Also, dear members of the European Parliament. I'm representing the European Broadcasting Unit today, an association that represents 113 member organizations across Europe. And we provide, on a day-to-day basis, media content, quality media content from news, sports to music to our members. And we facilitate actively for 75 years already cooperation between these members and act as a center of learning and sharing. To start with, I'd like to say that Europe foremost boasts a vibrant media sector. It is unique in the world, I don't have to convince you of that, and plays a key role for democracy and society. Public service media alone invests 21 billion euros in local and European content every year. Together, they also employ 42,000 journalists, making them the biggest newsroom in Europe. And generally, trust in Europe, in media, remains high. It may be sounding a bit weird, but it is the case. The figures are showing it. A key role also for public service media, which remain the most trusted sources of news in more than 90% of European countries. And this manifests it very clearly at times of crisis. For instance, as we've seen lately in Spain and Portugal, when there's a powerful power blackout, people turn to media and broadcasts to get accurate and reliable news and information. But obviously that trust in media cannot be taken for granted. It was already hinted to. Today journalism is under strong attacks. Media outlets, including public service media, face pressures. And importantly also the recent experience shows that decisions in the world and in Europe to stop investing in independent media and professional journalism have serious consequences. Our members tell us that they have seen that these steps imply steps away from democracy and allow more space for hostile actors to spread propaganda more easily and widely. So, first powerful message is investments, high-level investments in quality media need to be upheld, and guaranteeing that journalists and other media professionals can operate in that stable and safe environment. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the European Media Freedom Act and the need to properly apply and enforce it. Going hand in hand, obviously, with a firm action against breaches of rule of law. We all know the link between independent media and also rule of law, so that is important. We have to actually not avoid talking also about big tech when we talk about accessing news and other media content. The Reuters Institute annual global survey, I believe you all heard of it in the past, actually confirms, and there is the next slide. Bear with us, it's just a little slowly. It was a bit too fast, apparently. No. Reveals that 1 out of 5 persons that actually looks for news identifies news websites and applications as their main source of news, which means, and it's a trend that is lasting already for a number of years, that social media search and aggregators remain a main gateway to online news. We've seen the last few years even a bigger diversification of platforms acting as news gateways, which is new. And we obviously also witness the moves by big tech such as Meta to actively reduce the role of news on its platforms and disinvestments in fact-checking. There is an accelerating crisis of false and inaccurate information online and the harms that creates for media and democracy. The risks are real. We see it on a day-to-day basis. Orchestrated campaigns by malign actors are undermining the credibility of democracy and cultivate distrust. And these campaigns get harder and harder to detect and dismantle also by media because it involves the use of new AI tools powered by algorithms. So, second point is obviously bringing us to the EU Digital Rulebook. Whether it's the Digital Markets Act to restore fairness, whether it's the Digital Services Act to render big tech more accountable, or the online rules in the European Media Freedom Act, they all need proper enforcement and application. We feel that platforms today do not take enough action to tackle illegal content or to tackle manipulative behavior used to spread misinformation. Media and journalists have first-hand experience with the damage by scam campaigns that abuse brands of media, but also images of news anchors and lead journalists. We have collected numerous examples that highlight this problem. So the proceedings the Commission has launched under the DSA against big tech must therefore be followed through urgently. The rapid deployment, obviously, of AI has increased the challenge and added further complexity. And with the growth of the use of generative AI, it is more and more vital to ensure that reliable news alongside other trusted media content rises to the surface online and is visible, and that its integrity must be fully protected. Don't get me wrong, AI offers great potential for the media sector. Our journalists, and it's been documented also in our latest publications on leading newsroom rooms that you can see there, they embrace the use of AI to enhance their reporting. They do it already today. And the AI tools they help develop are valuable tools to help detecting and tackling disinformation or misinformation. But there is an issue with the unfettered use of generative AI, particularly in the field of news, which leads to the easier spread of misinformation and therefore undermining the access to accurate news. We also shouldn't forget that the generative AI is also likely to render media in Europe even more dependent on big tech platforms, which are often acting as oligopolistic structures. So that is also an important aspect to consider. The BBC actually recently tested the most prominent AI assistants we all use and its ability to accurately relay information from BBC news content specifically. And we were quite shocked about the results that came back from this research because they were found to distort BBC news content. More than half of the answers that AI gave us to the questions about news were assessed to have significant issues of some kind of form. And nearly 1 out of 5 of AI answers citing BBC content introduced factual errors. So this is really a sign that something is wrong and that we need specific attention to the issue. So the risk is news integrity, trust in news, proper attribution, allocation of sources, and they tend to be lost when news is solely generated via generative AI. The public needs to have the chance to evaluate for themselves the information they receive, and transparency is key here about the sources that are being used. Citations in an agreed format, linking to the original content is really essential. Importantly, intellectual property needs to be also respected. Just 2 weeks ago, the organization I represent took the initiative alongside One IFRA, the biggest news collection of news, public and private news media, called for a campaign, called on AI developers to team around to ensure AI is safe, reliable, and beneficial for news and the public. So we opened around a number of key principles to a dialogue with them and call for them to cooperate with media to protect the value of trusted news. Now, industry talks are incredibly important, obviously, but it is equally essential to ensure that the policies and the rules you're working on a day-to-day basis can also protect the value of news and trusted media content and that they apply in the right way and do not miss their target. We expect that AI solutions will only become more and more integrated in the media interfaces you routinely use to access news and media, whether it's a connected TV, a dashboard in a car, or any other media player with search functionality. So, does my message also to look with a certain sense of urgency at the issue of visibility, the prominence of media with a particular value of society, for instance, public service media which is independent on key media interfaces. Issues like proper display and source attribution on these interfaces will matter even more in the future than they have until now. And we're pleased to see that the Media Freedom Act already recognizes that important principle of attribution, brand attribution, but more is needed. Finally, to stay within time, I just want to make a point on innovation. Innovation is absolutely key. I have the privilege to see journalists and innovators from public media and their partners work on a daily basis to test the power of AI, to curate trusted news and accurate news, create innovative platforms and reliable media spaces. So it is about automatic translation, recommended trusted news, and testing chatbots. Europe absolutely needs this robust structure to support tech and innovation and collaboration. Bringing together content and innovation is key for democracies in Europe, but also to render Europe more independent from infrastructures outside Europe. Many thanks, and I'm here for questions.
Ganz herzlichen Dank für Ihre Präsentation.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. HÅLIEN for 10 minutes too.
Thank you for the invitation to discuss questions that I have been engaged in for most of my life, in fact. I work as a group editor in Schibsted, a Norwegian media group based in the Nordics and operates in the Nordic countries, where we own some of the leading news destination in that area. When journalism works as intended, it is an effective defender of liberal democracies. There are three key attributes that allow us it to have this effect. And the first one is the dissemination of critical and independent information on issues important to people and society. The second is, of course, information that holds all forms of power accountable and exposes abuses of power. And the third one is the role as an arena for diverse opinions and discussions. This raises an important question. Is it the case that liberal democracies in Europe weaken when editorial media weaken and strengthen when the media strengthen? And is there a direct cause and effect relationship? These are questions I have worked on over the past year. Let me start by stating that editorial media are only truly effective defenders of liberal democracies if they are stronger than the opposing forces. And they certainly are not always stronger. I have used 4 large data sets and compared these data against each other. This is the Democracy Index from Videm Institute in Sweden, a large study on news research in all EU countries, coordinated by the Center for Media Pluralism and Media Freedom in Florence, a Media Pluralism Monitor from the same center, and the Press Freedom Index from Reporters Without Borders. This is further supplemented with data from the Reuters Institute on news avoidance and willingness to pay for news, as well as more general knowledge about media, economic development. And last but not least, I have interviewed 20 experts with a lot of insight in this area. What we see is that we have experienced a negative trend over the past 10 to 15 years in all the areas for which we have data. Liberal democracies have weakened. We have seen more and larger news deserts, especially in rural areas. We have seen less media diversity, and only 3 of the 29 countries we have studied, that's the EU countries plus Norway and Britain, have made progress in press freedom over the past decade. In addition to this, we know that editorial media throughout the EU area face fierce competition from social networks, both for advertising revenue and for people's time. Only in Norway and Sweden is there a relatively high willingness to pay for digitally distributed news, which has made it possible to replace some of the lost advertising revenue with user income. But even here, we have had to cut editorial costs over the past 15 years several times. We know that especially young people are increasingly avoiding editorial media, and that this trend also significantly affects people in what we call socio-culturally vulnerable groups. It is also my clear impression that there is, in some, far too little innovation being undertaken by traditional media in Europe. Summed up, the situation for Europe's editorial media looks roughly like this. News deserts have expanded. There are more people, particularly young people, who do not perceive today's journalism relevant to them. Trust in the media has decreased in most EU countries. Oligarchs and illiberal politicians have increasingly taken control of media to use them for their own benefit, and the media themselves are innovating at a pace that is not proportional to the challenges they face. In total, this means that editorial media in the EU area have most likely been significantly weakened in recent years. A good number of the largest and strongest, I believe, have a good chance of renewing themselves sufficiently to survive at a relatively influential level, while others are probably so weakened that they are most likely to disappear. It is in Central and Eastern Europe that the problems for democracies and journalism are most critical. But it is naive, I would almost say dangerous, to assume that this is only the case there. We in the Nordics rank among the top in the world in areas related to democracy, press freedom, living standards, and freedom of expression. But even here, we see some of the same problems evolve as in other parts of Europe. We see a political shift towards the extremes, also in Sweden and Finland, and we have alarmingly high levels of news avoidance also in the Nordics. Those I have interviewed are not entirely in agreement about the relationship between editorial strength or capability and democratic levels, but they seem to believe that there is a connection. My summary of this is that one must study various forces acting at the same time to understand what is decisive when societies move away from the ideals of a liberal democracy and choose to support illiberal politicians. A classic example of this would be that journalism with low trust and limited reach will have relatively little ability to counter demagogic leaders who know how to exploit strong emotions in the population, such as fear, anger, and deep concern for the future. If we add another opposing force to this, namely disinformation, it becomes difficult to resist. The explanation for the weakening of media influence on issues related to democratic values, I believe, lies partly in the strength of competing forces and partly in the media's own shortcomings. Just to be clear, editorial media are still important for maintaining liberal democracies. It is just that this influence in the role of disseminators of facts and critics of power is far too often sidelined by forces that are stronger. Therefore, strengthening the journalistic function is absolutely necessary to counter destructive forces. It is also important to emphasize that innovation work is, of course, not weak across all European media companies. Many are working with innovation at a relatively high level, especially in areas like artificial intelligence. The problem is simply that the differences between media companies are so great that many can hardly be called digital at all. It is interesting to note the new ideas being implemented by established companies engaging in extensive innovation, and not least by journalistic startups, often founded by young and idealistic people. Much of this involves adapting content to the individual needs of users. Several of these initiatives can be described as format agnostic, meaning that users themselves can choose whether to consume the content as text, audio, or video. There also seems to be a focus on placing content in a more understandable context. In addition to our business internal call for more innovation, we have two policy recommendations for the EU. Make sure that relatively new and important regulations for editorial media are efficiently enforced. That's the first one. And the second one is we introduce a mechanism that we call a media assessment test to make sure that regulations meant for big tech do not cause unintended harm for editorial media. I believe that the media outlets capable of delivering higher relevance for more people, better comprehensibility, and the most engaging presentation format at eye level with users have some of the most crucial elements needed to regain some of the influence that editorial media have lost as defenders of liberal democracies. It will be hard, but far from impossible. But the clock is ticking.
Vielen Dank, the clock is ticking.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Ms. SCHELL, who is with us online.
Frau Schell, Sie können.
Go ahead, Mrs. SCHELL.
Can you hear us, Mrs. Schell? There seems to be some technical issue.
Oh, finally. Thank you. My deepest apologies, my microphone was not activated. I hope anyone can hear me now.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure and honor to have been invited to this hearing and been given the opportunity to raise some crucial topics when it comes to the state of journalism in the present and challenges in the future. I'm speaking on behalf of the Presseclub Concordia, whose vice president I am, but rest assured, anything I'm stating here, I full-heartedly support also in my day job as Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Austria's independent national news agency, APA, thus representing two organizations that are committed to high-quality independent journalism in Austria. I would like to use today's hearing as an opportunity to highlight some key factors that can put independent journalism under pressure. Because the key questions for us must be, is it still possible, and how can we ensure for us as journalists to fulfill our purpose? And what factors could prevent us from fulfilling our mission in the near future? And what do I mean by mission, by our purpose? It's still the universal, the old task, but not the obsolete task to contribute to an informed society that makes informed decisions. This is the reason I became a journalist, and this is the reason why I still work as a journalist. And the first aspect I want to highlight is, as having a significant impact on journalism is, and it may not come as a surprise to you, and it has been mentioned before today, AI technology. But do not worry, we'll not talk about the possibility of chatbots replacing journalists. This would be a very simplistic way of looking at what AI is doing to our jobs, because I'm convinced it will not happen on a big scale in the near future. Also, concerns of misinformation or manipulation have already been raised today. What I want to stress in the context of this hearing is the possible impact of AI technology on editorial autonomy and agency. Because we know, and also this we've heard today, Europe's newsrooms are keen on innovation. We are moving towards a hybrid media reality actively. I'm one of the staff at my company that actively embraces new technology and actively engages in implementing it in our newsrooms. So, in this hybrid media reality, journalists and machines share tasks in the newsrooms. They share responsibility for editorial decisions and they share the responsibility for the storytelling. But, and we must be aware of this, it means the restriction of journalistic autonomy. So, journalistic autonomy has traditionally been defined as a barrier against undesirable external influences. But with the implementation of AI technologies in our editorial processes, we are actively inviting semi-autonomous actors directly into our newsrooms. We must be aware that this means we are losing autonomy and agency, even if this is a self-imposed result. So we could say the impact of AI technology on the media business is the next stage in a technology-driven spiral of disruption in the media business. From the journalistic perspective, however, I think even this very drastic view falls short, because for the first time, a technology has the potential to substantially transform not only media consumption habits, user preferences, media distribution and media business models, but also the way journalism is done. And we have to ask ourselves, do we have the necessary ethical and legal frameworks to deal with this? Are our societies and our democracies ready for such a seismic shift? And these are questions of utmost priority. The second point I would like to address is, and it is sort of connected to the first point, is pressure on journalism through marginalization, or if you will, through blurring the professional role of journalism. This can happen in the hybrid media reality that I sort of described. But in an age of editorial society, the form and number of mass media have multiplied exponentially. There are radio channels and print publications and blogs, podcasts, multimedia offerings, and of course, countless social media channels. Everything today is mass media, but not everything is journalism. We must ask ourselves, in all our efforts to safeguard media freedom, do we actually agree on what we mean by those who practice journalism? Do we have a common understanding of what journalism is today and of who is a journalist? For example, many legislative initiatives at the national level in Austria, they do not aim at the functional definition of journalism, but rather link to the characteristics of media companies and media employees. A definition of what journalism actually is today is lacking. And this falls short in a dynamically changing media landscape. New forms of organization and distribution channels for journalism are gaining relevance, and traditional legacy media outlets are under pressure. Many questions remain unanswered today in relating to this. For example, how do we deal with partisan alternative party media organizations that actively seek to construct parallel realities? Where does activism begin if covering pressing relevant topics today? Is an objective definition of journalism even possible, and what might it look like? Who gets to decide what's journalism and what not? The third aspect I want to raise today is a challenge that is not as visionary, is not as technologically fancy, but it's not less real. Intimidation of journalists by lawsuits. Independent and reputable journalism is under threat from legal pressure in all over Europe. Journalists are facing more and more obvious intimidation lawsuits called SLAPs, strategic lawsuits against public participation, because of their works. These practices are meant to stop or punish critical reporting. Constitutional legal instruments are being misused to silence journalists. And studies have shown that repressive regimes exert this kind of pressure even on the legal representatives of journalists. This means immense psychological, emotional and financial pressure through a flood of lawsuits, procedural delaying tactics and disproportionately high financial claims that often threaten the journalist's livelihood. Due to the high costs involved, even the mere threat of legal action has enormous intimidating potential. The desired side effect of the plaintiff side is a deterrent effect for any further criticism, the chilling effect, the dreaded chilling effect from the point of view of a liberal democracy. My press club, the Concordia Press Club, has set up a journalism litigation fund, which sees itself as a protective shield for freelance journalism and offers financial and legal support against abusive intimidation practices. Alone, the fact that we need funds like this in a developed democracy is a warning sign that we should not ignore. So, I was very fast. I think I'm surprised myself. Thank you for your attention, and I hope I have been offering valuable input. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. We don't mind you being fast. Thank you so much. Also vielen Dank für diese aufschlussreichen Präsentation.
Thank you. That was very informative. It was good that you were so fast. Now we can have a Q&A. We want to allow MEPs to ask questions, but I have to limit that to just 1 minute so that the experts can answer. Start with the EPP cult, then EPP EUDS, then S&D. So Mr. Tar has the floor for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for these valuable presentations. I'm very glad that we have this hearing because I do think that if we don't take this issue seriously and we do not act together, we risk watching democracy being dismantled before our eyes, piece by piece, headline by headline. And I'm coming from Hungary, so you probably understand why I'm saying this. I have two questions. One question for Mr. GEKIERE. In cases where the independence of public service media has been significantly weakened over time, how does the European Broadcasting Union see its role when it comes to supporting future efforts to rebuild that independence, if and when the conditions allow? And my second question is to Ms. SCHELL, if I may. Can you share insights on how media organizations in Austria have navigated challenges to press freedom? Any lessons learned that you would encourage for others? Thank you. I hope it's not my fault that the screen went.
It was perfect. Thank you. So, Mr. Sichowski, also from the EPP for the EUSD. He's not here, apparently. Where is he?
Okay, sorry, I didn't understand your pronunciation, but it's sometimes problems, so don't worry about that. Dear colleagues, esteemed guests, I would like to address the recent development in Hungary that my colleagues Mr. Tar already mentioned. The proposed law is a direct attack to the press freedom and freedom of speech. According to the law, the organizations that criticize the government are foreign agents. We know this from Russia and its foreign agent law. This is how Russia is used to stop independent media in the civil society. We can say that there is a clear Russian non-democratic influence on EU member states' legislation. So-called Office for Sovereignty Protection would be able to investigate and find organizations that do not follow the new rules. The fines can be up to 25 times the amount of foreign money an organization has received. This law is not about protecting the country. It's about stopping opposition and independent media. As a member of the European Union, we must defend democracy, freedom of speech and rule of law. Dear guests, dear colleagues, I would like to express 3 questions. Do you see such tendencies in other EU countries? Do you see it is a Russian influence on interference on Hungarian legislation? It is anything to do to prevent this to happen in other countries? Thank you very much for response.
Thank you. So this was more than 1 minute, but of course this was also on me. So for the S&D for Kalt, Sabrina Repp.
Ja, vielen Dank. Ich werde Deutsch sprechen.
Thank you very much, German. So please put your headphones on. I'm wasting 3 seconds of my speaking time to allow you to put them on. There are 3 big issues that I've developed. One is trust, the other is young people, and then the third is the ticking time bomb. So let's put it all together. You spoke a lot about trust and confidence. How do we ensure that there's more trust in public media and broadcasters? But we also heard that people's behaviour is changing. In our cult committee, we recently heard about young people and how young people trust influencers more than journalists. So how do we regain trust, particularly the trust of young people? Then let's turn our focus to older people. Older people do also use social media. So how do we create trust between generations? Because I think there's a generational gap, a generational issue here. Then there's the issue of media competence, which we can't overlook. Then a last question. You've said that perhaps it's already too late. Are we lagging behind too much? In your view, what should we do immediately so that we can reverse the trends you've pinpointed? Because if we look at Romania and the election results there, I think we're already seeing what you've been talking about.
Sì, grazie per le presentazioni, mi unisco.
Thank you for the presentations, and I'd like to echo the words of thanks. They were very relevant, topical and helpful. I'm very interested in disinformation because, as colleagues have already said, we know that organised crime use these information bodies to send out misinformation, including about the situation in Ukraine, but also about public administration in the EU as well. And we're having to take sanctions. We've suspended 27 different disinformation channels, and we're also taking measures about the broadcast of information that has been sanctioned within the borders of the EU. But what's the problem? Well, the content is still broadcast. This happens in a lot of countries. It happens in my country, Italy, where one of the main Russian propagandists, Soviet, has been invited to speak on public television, but they can speak on private platforms as well. So what kind of measures can we take? What do you believe we can actually do? What measures can be taken to guarantee respect for these sanctions? I mean, I'm talking again about the Italian case. You're not allowed to broadcast any Russian television on state channels, but we still have a broadcaster a journalist who is in Italy regularly broadcasting from there. So what can we do to ensure that sanctions are respected and that we counter disinformation, but at the same time respect freedom of press, which remains sacrosanct? It's still a key principle for our public institutions. But journalism is something different from disinformation.
Thank you very much. Please let me remind you, you have 1 minute each. We're running over time. So for the PFE EUSD, Mr. Tertsch.
Sí, muchas gracias.
Thank you. I was listening before I arrived in the room, and I was surprised by some of what I heard. You say that public media is reliable. Well, where is that the case? You say that Spanish media, Spanish public media, Spanish public TV is reliable. Where everyone laughs at Spanish TV. It's ridiculous. It's propagandistic. It's the propaganda tool of the socialist government, a government which is mired in corruption, and they're trying to cover everything up, and they spread disinformation. I was a journalist for 40 years. I wrote op-eds. I was an editor, and I've done a bit of everything in my time in the sphere of journalism. But what I've never seen is that some journalists want to silence other journalists by saying they're not journalists. Who has the right to say who is a journalist and who isn't? This is extremely dangerous, an extremely dangerous trend. Thank you. One final thing. What about the funding issue? Funding?
5 seconds. What we heard about Hungary is a disinformation as well, because what they are saying is they are going against illegal financial the financing of the NGOs, and we saw what is happening in this house and in the European Union with the NGOs, that they are being financed for a very specific political goal.
So for the ECR, UDS, Mr. Terhes.
Here, thank you. I will try to be as short as possible. You were talking about media and journalism, and I think it's important to understand that the two are not the same. Media, generally, you can include media outlets. But when we talk about journalism, journalism clearly is not just a job. It's a vocation, it's a call, which is mandating the journalist to seek the truth, to disseminate the truth, and to defend the truth. This is the reason why we have the access to freedom of information. This is the reason why a journalist should be able to spread the message, and a journalist should be protected when it's doing that. And you guys were talking about the SLAPP legislation. Now, in order to keep a balance here between seeking the truth, promoting the truth, defending the truth, and fighting disinformation, because we've been hearing this for a long time. I also heard here mentioning the elections in Romania. I would like to know the opinion of the experts. How exactly do we keep a fair and just balance between the two? Because each one of us has a bias. Journalists are also human beings. They have their own bias. Maybe the media outlet has its own bias. But at the end of the day, faithfully speaking, we all want to seek the truth and disseminate the truth. And I'm wondering how exactly we could keep that balance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Petro for Renew, the Cult Committee.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you also to the speakers for their presentations. My question is to all of you, as you are professional journalists with high standards. So in the EU now we have the DSA and the ENFA. In the ENFA, Article 18 is supposed to limit large social media and platforms from arbitrarily removing content from recognized media services. But there are exceptions with regards to illegal content as defined in the DSA, the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, or other EU law. Do you see social media platforms honestly complying with Article 18? And will they try to use the exception for illegal content as a way to avoid the 24-hour stop-the-clock protection from takedown? Thank you.
Und Herr Brandstätter für die...
Mr. Brandstätter for the Renew Group.
You talked about trust. You both of you talked about trust in media, and I would be interested. Do you talk to in ABU? You know, to the different stations, and I suppose the trust in the different countries is different. And could you explain that? And also, do you talk to them about political pressure? Because there are two different things. The one thing is political pressure on the CEOs, on the leaders, and the other one is on journalists. And I suppose that's also different in different countries, and I think that would be very important. My second question is to Mr. HÅLIEN, because I'm interested. We know that obviously the media situation in the northern countries is better. What are you doing differently? Is it just the political culture? What do you do to keep journalists that they have more freedom than probably in other countries? And of course, I would ask my former colleague in Austria, Katharina, SCHELL, because I know how is the situation. How do you see the situation in Austria right now? Because as we know, there was a government that put a lot of pressure on the media, also on Austrian press agency. When the chancellor didn't like certain headlines, he called you and so on. I hope this is not anymore, but I would be interested how it is. And also a question to all of you: how is the situation with what I call media corruption? Especially in Austria, the government and different parts of government give a lot of money to certain newspapers where they expect that they write nicely about them. How is it in other countries? And is there a European survey to see how the difference is in the different countries? And also then we can talk about it, what we can do against it. And last question, how it is about disinformation campaign of Russia. Do you feel in different newspaper and media organizations already a certain disinformation campaign or pressure by Russia? Thank you.
Und für die Grünen, Eva, Frau Gese.
For the Green, Mr. Gese, for the EUDS side.
Here, I would like to ask the question about prominence and visibility that were mentioned for media content. I'm hearing this a lot, especially from public media, also from my country. But the real problem we have here is that we have algorithms on social networks that systematically create higher visibility for disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation than for fact-based information. Also, it is a lot easier to create AI-generated content or just to put a rumor or a lie out there rather than to produce fact-based, evidence-based information, which requires a lot of journalistic research and work. So there is a systematic disadvantage for information. Why do you only focus on visibility and prominence for especially public media or a certain chosen kind of media outlets, rather than insisting, like joining the battle with everybody else who wants fact-based information in the focus, and asking the Commission to work on the algorithms under Article 34 and make sure that users' choices count and not the choices of the networks, of the social platforms who give more visibility to disinformation? So shouldn't that be a joint battle to change the whole environment, the whole incentive system? That's my main question. Since everybody took 2 minutes, I will just take a few seconds. One thing I have not heard mentioning is the advertising market. I mean, one of the reasons that media outlets are so much under pressure is the fact that advertising revenue does go to Google right now, which has a monopoly. This was established by a US court. Shouldn't we focus a little bit on rebalancing the advertising markets, having more competition there? Because right now it's the same two players, Google and Meta, who control who gets to see the content, who dictate their opinion on who gets to see which content, and to control the whole revenue system and the advertising system. I think this is where we should focus more. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Mrs. Arvanitis?
Εδώ.
Mr. I'm sorry.
Mr. Σας ευχαριστώ. Καλησπέρα σε όλους σας. Άκουσα...
Hello, thank you. Good evening. I heard some colleagues being enraged, I remind you, and this is a question to the EBU, the control of the public TV lies with the Prime Minister himself in Greece. And I repeat this for you to put your headsets on. The responsibility for the public TV lies with the Prime Minister's office, and the National Information Service is also down to the Prime Minister's office. And the state news agency is also in the Prime Minister's office. So what Europe are we talking about? So one for the EBU, for the members of the EBU, whether the EBU sets such rules or how come journalists in TV outlets can breathe somehow. This is just the first thing I wanted to say. The second one, also to EBU. We had lots of reactions the other day in Eurovision about the voting process. Are you worried or concerned that the committees had a piece and then there was another song from Israel who was almost #1? Maybe you should look into this and see whether songs are also intermingled with politics. And another thing, in Greece, we have a series of issues in the press. For example, the new hot issue is the truth team, the triangular relationship, the company that is paid and also it gets assigned jobs from the public service. So there is an issue here with regard to the freedom of the press, and we have cases of journalists such as Karaivaza's case which haven't been investigated yet. And what measures should be taken to protect the vocation, the profession of journalists? Thank you.
For ESN Cult.
Ja, vielen Dank, Herr GEKIERE.
Mr. GEKIERE, the ARD and ZDF are two of the biggest members of your network, and they say that they are in favour of serious journalism, but that's not always the case. Last week, Jan Böhmermann from the ZDF was critical of a critical YouTuber on Clown's World, and he published personal details, thereby doxing this person, making people know where he lived, etc. And yet people pay a license fee to this network. And if you don't pay the license fee, you could be fined or even end up in prison. Aren't these public broadcasters not worried about competition? Isn't there a loss of trust in these traditional state media outlets? And then, is it right to have a mandatory licensing for broadcasters? France, for instance, has gotten rid of mandatory licensing fees. Shouldn't other countries follow suit and get rid of mandatory licensing fees?
EUDS.
Thank you, Chair. I'll speak in Bulgarian. Медиите в Европейския съюз, както обществени...
Media in the European Union, both public and private, are in despicable state. Their main purpose is not to inform, but to manipulate. The Minister of Propaganda of the Third Reich, Joseph Goebbels, would be proud of such media. Without any criticism, they present the audience all the narratives invented in Brussels and the other power centers. The authorities are saying that there is a deadly pandemic, then the media relays that further without asking any questions. Then the authorities say that there is a deadly threat coming from Russia and hundreds of billions of euros have to be spent on weapons, and the media are relaying this yet again without asking any questions. The authorities cancelled the elections in Romania, qualified Marine Le Pen as criminal and the Alternative for Germany as extremist organization, and the media obediently relayed that further. Völkischer Beobachter is who did this in Nazi Germany. Are we living today in some anti-utopian Euro-Nazi world today, so the media behave in a similar way, or are we in some Orwellian world which adopts the Media Freedom Act, which actually aims to complete the deletion of media freedom. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I cannot accept that someone... I see a lot of problems in Europe, a lot of problems with the media. But to compare it with Nazi, with Goebbels, I do not accept. And I really think we have... Hermann? Du bist meiner Meinung. Wir sind in vielen nicht einer... Very often we are not of the same opinion.
Maybe you would like
is,
to impose censorship, mister.
You
censorship.
You shut up.
Shut up. You are talking bullshit. You are talking bullshit, Mr. Nazi lover.
To compare
Mr. Nazi lover,
with
you
Nazi,
are.
and that's not...
Yes, because you are talking bullshit. You are talking against freedom of speech.
Floor to Mr.
Shut up.
You are an executioner of freedom of speech with your talk. Please.
Thank you very much.
I don't know about Bulgaria,
but
I don't know about Bulgaria, but according to Austrian law, if you say that in Austria you are in big trouble and you are in front of a court because you cannot compare what we are having here as a European democracy with the worst history of Europe, which is the Nazi time and which is Goebbels, and I will not accept it.
Thank you very much for this clarification. Maybe just also to clarify, it was not the media stating that the AfD is far right-wing, but it was actually the Verfassungsschutz. This is a very important distinction. Now, thank you all for your questions. I will have to leave now. I will give the floor to Mr. Strojewski to share the second round of Q&As. But first of all, we'll give the floor to the experts. They will have 10 minutes for the answers. So thank you very much. And for you all, have a nice afternoon.
Thank you very much. We have time for answers. First, pan Wouter GEKIERE. Ma pan 3 minutes. Please.
Can I just get clarity? How many minutes do I have? 3 minutes, okay.
3 minutes.
Quick, because the questions were quite dense. How does the EBU rebuild and helps media to become independent, to stay independent? We worked for the past few decades very closely with our members, obviously, but also with the international community of journalist federations and the like, speak out and work on promoting what international journalistic standards look like. We have various bodies working on that, and we do inform and help members to implement them on a day-to-day basis. There was a lot about activities we can do with young people, with influencers. I insist this is not one or the other. Some of the finest examples of public service media, journalists and young reporters involve working with influencers, involve working on literacy projects altogether. So I think we need to much more promote those by, I insist, of course, sustaining high levels of investments in media and media professionals, and make sure those type of projects, those kind of outlets, applications, have better chances to surface and be appealing also to young audiences. There's a lot also about possible solutions, Article 18, Digital Services Act. There's also references to should we focus just on algorithms and policies or on media rules? I'd say, again, both. The reason why we, as an EBU and an association, are talking both on big tech rules and on harnessing the power of users generally in Europe to have a better understanding how algorithms work, but also at the same time work on media, is because it concerns media. It concerns trusted information. It concerns you and me being able to take decisions for ourselves. This is not imposing a certain truth. It is giving the public what it needs in terms of transparency, information, building blocks, if you like, to take that judgment call. So I think we very much work on both channels. The reason why we focused also on Article 18 is what seems a very basic requirement, meaning give us a communication channel to talk to a big platform to address a issue. In case of media, it is about an application that disappears, a news program. I would say that basic principle is also quite relevant for any user engaging with a platform. If you have an issue and you raise your voice and you have your voice raised, but you cannot access through a specific communication channel anyone working for any of the big tech platforms, you have an issue. I would say in Europe, we're quite blessed. You can disagree with some of the footage you see on media, but we have channels of communication. You know perfectly what we stand for. You know perfectly how trusted certain outlets are and distrusted they are. And we work every day as an association to improve those levels. And we need also regulation. We need the European Media Freedom Act to properly enforce and come in strong support. I already reached 3 minutes, but happy to talk also bilaterally to give you more answers to this.
Thank you very much. Next, Einar HÅLIEN, please. 3 minutes.
Thank you. First, the question about propaganda and disinformation. It was quite a lot of questions about that. And to be absolutely clear, I think it's impossible to get rid of all kinds of disinformation. And if we try to do so, the only result will be that we hamper the freedom of speech. And that's not a possible and good way to go. I think the most efficient thing we can do to fight back on disinformation and propaganda is to build resilience among the citizens, and especially among young people. Teach them how to read sources in a critical manner, teach them how to find out what's real and what's fake, and things like that. And of course, also, as I talked about, to build on the best we have in the free editorial tradition to counter with fact-based information. One question was about trust and what to do about trust and how to improve trust in media. I think it's a couple of answers to that, and the most important is probably to work with relevance. Because when we ask young people, why do you lack trust in media? They answer that they don't feel that much of the content from traditional editorial media is relevant for them. And that's our responsibility. We have to work with that in the business, and I think quite a lot of us are doing so. And we also have, of course, as always, obligation to work about balance in our coverage, in our editorial coverage. One question was about the Nordics. What's make the Nordics special compared to the rest of Europe? And I don't want to brag too much about this because we also have quite a lot of problems and we don't take anything for granted. But I think one of the answers that we are pretty well off compared with other parts of Europe is that we have a strong political culture in our history. We have equality to a quite good degree, openness and transparency in our cultures. And I think we have a high level of trust in society at general. We have good protection in legislation and good media support systems. I think that that's the main answers to that question. And the last one was about is it too late? Is it too late to secure democracies and free media in Europe? My answer to that is no, it's not too late. But we have to have open discussions between both media themselves and you, politicians, to find out what is the most efficient way to fight back. And we can do that. That's not too late. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, Katharina SCHELL. 3 minutes.
Thank you. We are talking a lot about media. Media and journalists, media and politicians are meeting here. We should also bear in mind that we all need to talk to the audience and the users. This is one aspect that hasn't been mentioned today, and it's very important. Also, please bear in mind, and I'm very thankful for the remark on generational aspects of media literacy. We must not overlook the older generation. I'm counting myself to be part of the older generation. Yes, young people, they don't consume legacy media, but they might be more literate when it comes to new media. And we know that social media, new media are widespread with the elder generations, and they are the ones who actually are also the main decision makers. So please don't over-stress media literacy for young people. Media literacy as well, is it too late was one question today. I think it's too late it's too late to talk about media literacy. We must be aware that tech literacy and AI literacy are the most important skills when it comes to consuming information. We must not overlook that. One question was concerned with journalists' bias. Bias, of course, is a buzzword. That's not only because of AI. The AI discourse has been very popular. Everyone has a bias. I have a bias. But the journalist, acknowledges their bias. They are aware of their bias and they handle it well in the sense not to let it taint their work. And that's an important difference between biased reporting that's not reporting and reporting, bias awareness reporting, leaving the bias aside. Asked about the situation in Austria. On the one hand, I think resilience against attempts to limit media freedom is the most important factor is acting united, because the Austrian market is a very small media market. It's so important that media companies do not allow themselves to be divided, but jointly and strongly represent fundamental democratic values, such as the freedom of expressions. Constant vigilance is also required, and that's where civil society, which I represent here for my press club, plays a vital role. In the best of the world, the market players and the civil society want the same, a free speech. And now I've got only 10 seconds and can't answer the question of my former colleague, Helmut Brandstätter. Let me just say, receiving phone calls from press officers from the government is completely okay. What's not okay is if they come with threats. It should be obvious, but sometimes it isn't. But we've had a super election year in Austria last year, and coverage was, I'd say, flawless from a democratic point of view. So that's how journalism in Austria is able to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have a very short time, catch the eye. EPP. Please, Pani Glawiak.
Yes, thank you very much. I will
1
continue.
minute, please.
Yeah, of course, I will continue on Croatian. So, very briefly,
I just want to say, as a former journalist, the times have changed. And nowadays, there are both political and economic pressures exerted on journalists, and we are witnessing this in a number of countries. And this is why the traditional media is now becoming less dominant, because there is also the wave of new digital media. But I would also like to point out misinformation, because there is an 80% higher chance for misinformation to be shared than the facts. And I think this definitely contributes to the speedier propagation of false news. It has been proven that the countries with the weaker laws and the lower level of media literacy are more prone to such influences. Therefore, I would like to encourage us all to be proactive. Let us not just react once the journalists had already been attacked, which was the case, for example, with the murder of the Maltese journalist. I believe that we should focus on the protection of journalists and the protection of media freedoms proactively in small communities. It is important to see how we can financially aid smaller media and broadcasting houses to see how they can contribute to the media literacy in young people and in senior citizens. Thank you.
Herzlichen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender, und ein herzliches Dankeschön auch.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all those who gave us such excellent presentations this afternoon. The way that media are used, of course, takes place in a financial context. I think that media platforms are not social media because they're a business model of a completely different sort. it costs money. And of course, you do need algorithms, but it certainly costs money, which the publisher needs to come up with. I'm wondering about the possibility of new demand offers, new tools in the public arena, and what restrictions might apply. I wonder how relevant they might be deemed to be. How would they relate to the DSA, the DMA? And I wonder, furthermore, whether you think that the legislation needs to be tightened up and whether the content of the legislation as it currently stands is actually sufficient, and where you think the boundaries actually lie and what the implications are. Thank you.
SND? No. Culture, Church, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. The advertising in our public market, particularly for the written media, has led to a situation of total dependency for all media. A lot of media have interests behind them, which they're being financed through their advertising. We need to have transparency. Some countries, it's other countries that are paying for the media. So, for example, in Poland, it's Germany paying for the media. Sometimes it can be hostile to certain types of government, which, even if it's a legitimate democratic type of government in Poland, or we see it in Hungary, in Spain at the moment, what we're seeing is that we've got to the point where the government never answers questions in Parliament from the very few journalists who still ask probing questions to the government. And these are the important questions. They only answer questions from journalists who support the government. This isn't journalism, it's something else quite different.
Thank you very much. Nicola Minchev, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to address my question to Mr. HÅLIEN. As a preliminary remark, I would like to say that, according to my understanding, a significant distinction between editorial media and social media is that in editorial media, behind the information stands its verification, the reputation of the media, the code of conduct of the media. On the other hand, in social media, we often have just anonymized information being spread. You mentioned that in Sweden and Norway there are more people who are willing to pay for quality content. My question to you is, do you see any particular tool or measures that could serve as a replacement where there is less willingness to pay for quality content? Or should we instead focus on creating the understanding that quality product doesn't come for free? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, Cynthia Mircio, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. In an age where disinformation spreads faster than facts, as we've been hearing all afternoon, we can't afford to overlook the quiet but the critical role of independent media in Europe, every corner of Europe, particularly local newspapers and local radio stations. These are the backbone of public trust. They report with proximity and integrity and accountability, and telling the stories that matter to our communities on the ground, not just in accordance with the algorithm. Yet across Europe, as we all know in this room, those local radio stations and local newspapers are under huge threat. They're struggling to survive in a digital world dominated by unregulated sources and click-driven content. If we value informed citizenship and social cohesion, then, friends, we must act to protect these local originators of news. Supporting independent local media is not charity, it's a democratic necessity, in my view. So let's think what concrete measures can be taken to ensure protections for our independent local media so that they can continue to serve as trusted guardians of factual information across our union in the current sea of disinformation. Gramagat.
Thank you very much. Last, Panayotio, please.
Hello, friends. This might be a big problem. Like this year, 30 or 40% of the content online is made by AI. And projected 2026, the content online made by AI might be at 90%. So I think a good step forward might be labeling when something is made by AI for the users to know that they read some things from AI. Then the question is, do you think this is a good step forward? Thank you so much, and I love you all.
Thank you very much. Now 5 minutes. Expert, please.
Thank you so much.
All right. Yes, thank you.
5 minutes in total. Okay. Short feedback. Members of Parliament are right in pointing out to the financial context and also the challenges commercial media directly faces. I think that's a valid point. We work a lot with the local broadcasters, local partners too. So we do see it on a day-to-day basis, the challenges they face. And we're there as an important partner. I think if faced with the questions like, will these new tools and rules be effective and do we need to look at reviewing them, I can only reiterate that some of the processes that have been agreed, for instance, the Digital Markets Act, open up to continue to analyze whether a given big tech platform acts as a gatekeeper or a gate, and imposes its market power. So I think it goes without saying that you have an important role to also keep track of the data and the role these platforms play, and insist that some of the platforms need to be also recognized as gatekeepers and need to adjust their behavior towards users in Europe. Specifically for media, there's definitely also a case to kind of have more powerful tools to make sure media and trusted content particularly can rise to the surface and is visible on all your key devices. Thank you.
First, to address the question about regulations and for example, DSA, DMA, and EMFA, is this sufficient? Do we need more? My answer to that and our answer to that is no, we need those regulations that we already have to work. Make sure that they are implemented and that they are respected, and do not stress a whole lot of new regulations right now. That's my honest answer to that question. Then I got the answer about the economy. In my media group, now we have the situation that about 70% of our income comes from user payment and 30% comes from ads, roughly, really roughly. A few years ago, it was the other way around. And I think what to do if people do not want to pay. And I always come back to young people because I think it's so critical to try to learn young people about journalism. What is it good for? How can you use it? How can you be critical? How can you engage? I think a discussion as we have in Norway right now about how can we have some kind of public economic support for to give especially young people access to independent journalism is at least one idea that can be discussed. But we can never say that journalism is for free. Then we destroy the whole quality of media, and everyone understands that, I think. So that was, in a very short time, the most important, I think. Thank you.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Yeah, AI labeling. What you mentioned, actually, I see the danger of a new AI divide forming with big online spaces filled with AI-generated slop that isn't any trustworthy information, and a media consumer elite that has the literacy and the means to consume trustworthy journalistic editorial information. We must do everything to prevent this from happening. Is mandatory labeling of AI content the way to go? I'm not sure. I did some work on AI transparency in journalism. And if we talk about labeling or disclosing AI applications in journalistic processes, simple labels will do more harm than good. This is something research also has found, and this is evident. If you slap a simple label made with AI onto any journalistic product, you will make the users hesitant about consuming that. So this is really a new factor that I think we don't really appreciate enough, how users will decide what information to consume, and if users will be able to tell if it's generic AI slop or it's trustworthy information. That being said, there was another question. I just wanted to add something, which is actually with my other head. Local newspapers, local radio stations, so important because they have the news relevant for the users. Securing their independence is, I agree, of utmost importance. I want to point at independent news agencies as well as a crucial backbone for any information society. And if you don't believe me, just look at what happened in Washington when the AP, an independent news agency, was banned from the president's press conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now time to Commission. Pan Sir Perkauskauskas. Sorry. 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and let me congratulate you upon organizing this very timely debate. We have had so many important themes in this debate: strong public service media, strong independent media operating on commercial terms, journalism. So all these are pillars of rich and diverse European media ecosystem. And also startups, it's also very important when they emerge and bring in new perspectives as well. So what is reassuring is that we at the European Commission, and then together with the Parliament, together with the Council, actually were acting on all these pillars, if you want, of strong media ecosystems. And then the message is, of course, at the same time, we need to continue. We need to continue using each and every opportunity to see whether we can do anything else. And there will be such opportunities coming. There will be review of the Visual Media Services Directive next year. There will be negotiations on the next multi-annual financial framework, which is also an opportunity perhaps to strengthen what we currently have in the Creative Europe program and continue moving in the direction of preserving and strengthening media across Europe. Now let me just mention a few specific things, because in your debates you were pointing to different instruments of European Union. And so just to mention that Media Freedom Act, so Media Freedom Act, yes, by all means, it has safeguards for independent functioning of public service media. It has safeguards against what one of you called media corruption, so non-transparent use of funds to influence media. So most of those provisions will start applying from August of this year. And for example, on state advertising, there are strong transparency requirements. So each member state will have to publish detailed information on how state advertising was allocated to different media. So in a year or two, we will have quite a good picture across Europe how media is getting state advertising. Then Article 18, indeed, Article 18 is focusing on circulation of media content on very large online platforms. So by all means, our hope is that platforms will be much more careful in dealing with media content. They will be much more careful when taking decisions to remove or reduce visibility of media content. But also other parts, some of you mentioned visibility and prominence of media services and media content. So again, Media Freedom Act goes in the direction of increasing visibility of media services through the so-called customization provision, which at the same time asks user interfaces to preserve visual identity of a European media service provider. So with that, I stop. I have more things to say, but for the time being, this is my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kilka słów w moim języku na
A few words in my mother tongue to sum up. First of all, I want to thank all our experts. I am sure now we have a picture, a certain picture of the situation. The situation is not the best. There are numerous challenges. This debate is taking place in a moment when, during different political campaigns, the media are doing their job, they are playing a very important role, and I share your opinion that information is of the utmost importance, access to information, and also education would be of key importance here. We will have 1 minute break now. We will finish this panel and start another one in a moment, and I want to thank all of you. Thank you.
Only 1 minute and you. Yes, introduce.
Well,